Welcome back to Vintage Super League. I'm here joined by the Rich Shea. Rich, good to be with you.
Hey, Paul, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I didn't really know how my deck worked and wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be doing. I'm sure you have a lot of experience with decks of that nature, but it seemed like I had trouble putting together the various combos that were supposed to be put together in the deck.
So, part of the nature of workshop decks is that they're not really able to draw you into things, so you have to mulligan much more aggressively. You can't keep a hand and then hope that you just sort of draw the piece that you need, because you don't really have an engine to get you there. So you're really dependent on opening up a good hand. So taking 6 is usually better than keeping a hand that has part A but not part B.
Yeah, see, for me, my philosophy is shuffling takes so long. I never mulligan when I'm playing with real cards, so I like to practice like I play on Magic Online, just never take a mulligan. I don't know. Like I said, I have so little experience. I think it's maybe the first time I ever put Mishra's Workshop into play. So you're probably right. I should have taken more aggressive mulligans.
That's fair. Remember that when you have a land that's actually 3 lands, you can afford to have fewer cards in your opener.
Yep. Well, also, one thing you are not taking into account is how lucky I usually am. I'm normally extraordinarily lucky, and I thought perhaps I could rely on that, but unfortunately, that didn't work out this time. So,
I do respect the philosophy of not shuffling and being lucky, but I think ultimately you have to, look at your hand and decide if it's good enough, and if it's not good enough, ship back and see how 6 treats you today.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if 7's not enough, what is 6 going to do for me? That's kind of my philosophy. What's going to go on in this this match versus the Grixis Control versus Ephro's Abzan? What's the key?
Well, Grixis Control against the Junk deck will be, I think, it'll be an interesting one because the Planeswalkers are all so powerful that I think that the Junk deck will have trouble with them. And if Duretti arrives, that's going to be extremely powerful. But I think that the Hate Bear deck is very good, and each of the Hate Bears is an enormous threat all on its own.
Yeah, Comball is, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but Comball has been one of the cards that has been most annoying when I've tried to play blue decks and has most impressed me from some of these Abzan or white-black Hate Bears decks. It's just, it seems so innocent and so expensive, and then all of a sudden it's drained you for 8. You don't even know what hit you. So,
all right, well, it looks like we're ready to go, so we can see if the Hate Bears deck gets there or if Duretti gets there.
All right, as promised, Ephro with his pure Junk deck and Grixis Duretti from Kevin. Looks like Kevin has kept an opening 7, and Eric is thinking about his. What do you think about Eric's hand?
I would not deign to keep this hand if I were Ephro.
It's tempting, right? It's got everything you need but that second mana.
It is, and you get a turn 1 play, but not only are you really just in awful shape if you don't draw another land, but you don't really even have a great turn 1 play. So
Right.
it looks. So for those wondering at home, before Wizards came out with, I don't remember the new cool name for black, white, green. The archetype, the colors were called Junk. So I think now there's some barbarian tribe that has a name that's somehow related to that color combination, but Junk is the original name.
Yeah, preferred modern nomenclature is Abzan for this color combination, but I respect the nostalgia of pure Junk, and certainly when playing Vintage, that's the most apropos time to bust out that particular brand of memorabilia.
Now, didn't Didn't that Dracophile planeswalker travel back in time and get rid of all the barbarian tribes, so there is no Abzan?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to confess that my knowledge of the lore and flavor of the game has been really lapsed lately as I've gotten older. But you may be right about that.
This is my understanding, that while Abzan existed, it was removed from all of time and space and is no longer a color combination.
Now, so, Eric, yeah, with a hand he's going to go try to find a 1-mana accelerator, but his hand extremely slow and doesn't match up particularly well against Ancestral Recall, Gush, and hopefully removal on Kevin's half.
So that's an awkward hand for Ifro. If he plays Thalia, he cannot play Thorn or Greenstone Zenith, and he can't even play Galactique, and he can't play Manglehorn. So if he doesn't cast it now, he'll never be able to cast it. But if he draws a land, he'll be able to cast 2 threats next turn.
Yeah, and one of the cool interactions we see is despite Kevin having 2 mental missteps in hand, that doesn't help against the Greenstone Zenith for 1. So Eric able to get the very powerful Deathrite Shaman onto the battlefield.
That's true. So now Doretti can arrive, and I don't know if that's the right play, but I'm certainly excited to see it happen.
Yeah, and it's going to be a Doretti, which is very, very powerful against the slow draw that Eric has, but the shields are down to a certain extent, and although Eric's hand is just not powerful enough, I think, to really punish Kevin for putting the shields down this turn.
Yeah, and Ifro has. So there's Doretti. Doretti transforms the Mox into a removal spell for Deathrite Shaman, and now Ifro is once again awkwardly staring at this hand that doesn't quite do enough to make it scary.
Right.
He can spend 2 mana to build his own 1-drop, and his odds of drawing Greenstone Zenith next turn, still the same. Goes right back into the deck. In fact, they're better because there's 1 fewer Shaman to draw.
Yeah, and we see one of the weaknesses of some of these white-based hate bears or aggro disruptive strategies, which is that they're really good at leaning on the opponent, but not so great when the opponent's able to establish the first kind of repetitive advantage engine at making a comeback. And so Eric's really gonna struggle, I think, to deal with this Doretti, and as well as powerful cards like Gush and Vendilion Click that are coming from Kevin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Doretti's going to make a blocker friend.
And importantly, Deathrite Shaman, while it can really pressure a medium to low life total with its exile ability, not so good at pressuring planeswalkers.
Right. So there's the 3rd Thalia in case Ifro didn't have enough Thalia. Now here's a bonus copy just in case.
Yeah, and that will certainly have been the worst draw in Eric's deck at this point.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that if you're Kevin Cron, you're perfectly happy to let Ifro keep all of these exciting Magic cards because they're not very good, and you want to keep it that way.
Yeah, Manglehorn has some utility in the situation, as it is going to delay Doretti from using the minus ability for a turn and cause the next token to come into play tapped. So some possibility that Manglehorn allows Eric to pressure the loyalty of Doretti, but again, it's slow and probably not powerful enough.
Right. So I don't know. I would not take any of those cards. I don't think any of those are particularly terrifying.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Kevin is not scared of anything in Eric's hand. I think we're going to see Kevin or Eric make that Manglehorn play that we discussed earlier.
So the board shifts left and right. That's flavorful because Manglehorn is going to break things. So, you think Manglehorn hangs out with other Manglehorns and they're like, yeah, I blew up a Mindslaver. How about you? Yeah, I took down a Platinum Angel, and you? Yeah, I got a 1/1 dummy token that can't attack.
Yeah. Possibly. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, Manglehorn was kind of a card that they designed in order to deal with a really powerful vehicles deck. It was supposed to be powerful against the vehicles mechanic. But man, for those of us old school players who are used to playing with Octabi Orangutan and even using Survival of the Fittest to discard cards to go find your Octabi Orangutan, Manglehorn is just extremely powerful, and we've seen it make a splash in Legacy and obviously here now in Vintage as well.
It's a more family-friendly card too. It's just better in every way.
That's true.
So there's Culligan's command. That's
and Kevin was flooding just a little bit, but that Culligan's command is kind of exactly what he's looking for to, I would imagine, elicit a concession here from Eric, as he has shown a proclivity not to want to play out these games with very, very low equity.
I think, yeah. Now, the best thing that Kevin could do for Eric is allow Eric to discard a card.
Right. We can't see Kevin's 9th card in hand, but it's dig through time, okay?
Yeah, we'll see what Kevin finds on his journey through time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? You know, this is a game where things didn't go that well for Kevin. He had the early Planeswalker and Ancestral, but drew a ton of mana, a couple missteps that had no targets, and he's still kind of walking away with it, just based on Eric's deck, I think, kind of not functioning here.
Well, it looks like, good old Manglehorn did his job there.
Yes.
As Kevin's Mox arrives tapped and the Defender arrives tapped. So yeah, this is a further interesting story from Manglehorn at the Manglehorn bar, hanging out with his Manglehorn buddies.
Yeah, and if no, even if he had a 4th power here, Plow wouldn't be an out because of the missteps. Just a tough spot.
Ooh, there's Abrupt Decay. That has to be the best card in Evo stack, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the reasons to put both green and black in your Vintage deck. 2 colors that are non-blue. So
it's
yeah.
It's a good way to deal with, say, Oath of Druids. Also deals with Dorettis.
Mm-hmm. And Mirage Mirror.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of things. Deals with all of them. Wow. And the board rocks sideways as Deathrat Shaman does his thing. And that's enough to ready.
Eric valiantly, fighting through the Vendilion Click into ready, but he will be expecting a second wave of repetitive advantage generators after Kevin's resolved to dig through time and has 8 cards in his hand. So, this turn, which figures to be something along the lines of Jace the Mind Sculptor and Tasigur, is not going to come as a large surprise to Eric.
Well, it looks like Tasigur and Jace are going to high five and walk onto the battlefield together and then team up with their buddy, the Construct, and try to take down this Deathrat Shaman.
With this Jace, I mean, I'd be pretty tempted to return the Deathrat Shaman to Eric's hand. Is that...
I like that. That's a lot of value. I mean, you're going to get bored staring at both mental missteps. You don't have to anymore.
Right.
I mean, really what you're doing is gating Ephro's ability to deploy threats, and so long as Ephro's on the mono-threat turn plan, Jace will essentially buy enough time for Kevin to just win the game.
Kevin elects to use the Brainstorm ability instead, and hard to fault that too much. It's just so much fun.
It's a temptation.
Yeah.
I mean, drawing 3 cards, it's a good experience.
Yes.
So I can't fault Kevin for wanting to enjoy 3 cards. He has this game no matter what. It doesn't really matter. So, if he wants to draw 3 cards, that's fine. Ifro has a land with Summoning Sickness and decides that's enough magic for 1 game. We go on to the sideboard. It looks like Kevin has Culligan's Command, a bonus copy. That should do some good things for him. And he doesn't actually have a lot of other ways to deal with creatures. Campbell, in particular, is going to be really, really bad for him.
Yeah, he's relying on a braid as being kind of a flexible answer to creatures. Obviously less efficient than its older buddy Lightning Bolt, but certainly we understand why the choice of a braid is made with limited deck building space, flexibility at a premium, especially in these blue decks with a high amount of selection.
Right. It is strictly better than Shatter.
True. Unless they mind slaver you when you have your own Snapcaster Mage into play.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. So, I do like the flexibility. I mean, Kevin's deck is just full of powerful, flexible cards.
Right.
Culligan's Command is really flexible. A Braid is very flexible. In a deck like this with so many options, Snapcaster Mage, likewise, is very, very, very good. And you wrap that all together in a blue shell, and you have a powerful, flexible deck. Now, where decks like Kevin's usually run into trouble is against the, I guess they're not Gush decks anymore, but the heirs to Gush decks, the Turbo Xerox decks, the decks that build a really tiny mana base and use Preordain to glue it all together.
Storm also can be kind of tough for a deck like Kevin's. Is that also right?
That's absolutely true. Storm decks are very fast, and Kevin's interested in sort of playing a long game, using his value, using the options his cards give him to leverage play skill, and Storm is interested in not letting you have a second turn.
Right. And Storm also, by virtue of ending the game so quickly, playing, cards like whether it's Duress or Defense Grid can really invalidate some of the slower mid-range options. But that being said, Eric here on the play, big advantage in a matchup like this, and his hand is excellent.
Ooh, that is a good hand. That's a really good hand. Also, Kevin Cron's hand is quite solid too. So,
yeah.
Black Lotus is so good in these creature-based decks because it lets you start on turn 3 on your first turn. So he can play out 2 threats, and I kind of like playing Snake Man and Deathrat Shaman because that'll get his Wastelands flowing right away. Next turn he can curve nicely into Thalia or Vindicate, depending on what he needs to do.
Yeah, and certainly I agree with that opening line. But as you mentioned, Kevin's hand quite nice as well, and the ability to have the turn 1 of Braid means his hand actually lines up pretty nicely, and that Tasker will come down pretty early too. So interested to see how these early turns develop. A lot of interesting decisions.
Yeah. Someone told me recently that Vintage is a turn 1 format, and I told that person to watch the Vintage Super League.
Yeah. Interesting.
Looks like Ifro has other ideas than summoning the snake. So it looks like Thalia is arriving. Now, the advantage of Thalia is that it's going to slow down Kevin's development and deployment. So Kevin is going to have to use his first turn to make a Mox, and then, Moxes make Moxes. That's how the Circle of Life works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Eric goes for the more min-inefficient play, which happens to be pretty good against what Kevin has drawn here. It's going to create somewhat of an awkward turn 2 for Eric in terms of decision-making. So...
Well, the Ramunap Excavator. Oh, David Bowie. Very good.
Again, three kind of, oh, no, sorry, two options here for Eric. He can't cast his own Vindicate. So
Mm-hmm.
I think given that Kevin is led with an island that you're going to play Wasteland anyway, I'd be tempted to get the aforementioned David Bowie online this turn.
I like that. I think that's good. I mean, he just does so many good things against everything that Kevin wants to do. The Spirit of the Labyrinth prevents either player from drawing cards, and Ifro's deck isn't really in the card drawing business. In fact, Dark Confidant isn't actually a card draw at all. It hands you cards, but they're not really drawn. So this is just an example of an effect that is on the surface symmetrical, but in practice is not symmetrical at all.
And we see that Eric agrees with our assessment of the situation, and now Kevin's going to be forced to choose between three pretty appealing targets for this Abrade.
Ooh, that is. So Deathrat Shaman's main job here is slowing down Kevin's ability to summon Tasigur. I'll point out that Kevin can use Spirit of the Labyrinth for his own good by playing Vendilion Click on Ifro's turn, picking a card from Ifro's hand, telling Ifro to draw a card, and then laughing maniacally as Ifro can't draw a card.
We see, in order to, that line definitely clever and something worth considering. Kevin going for the Wasteland safe play of Mountain rather than Volcanic Island. So Vendilion Click's still outside of his ability to cast right now.
Right. He chooses to get the basic. Understandable. I didn't look to see if he has a second basic island.
Kind of a nice draw there, actually, from Eric, even though it just seems like a land that it now turns Ramunap Excavator into a thinning and card advantage machine, even if Kevin chooses to never play a non-basic land. And just another way that he can kind of, as we discussed in Game 1, lean on Kevin and apply pressure in another way to continue to press his advantage.
Yep. So if you're Kevin, what do you abrade?
See, for me, I think you have to abrade the Spirit of the Labyrinth. I think that this Ponder is going to have to resolve for you to do anything. It's also the creature providing the most just damage pressure right now.
All true. There's also the fact that sometimes when you kill Thalia happens to you again, and that's just not a pleasant feeling.
Yeah.
All right. So Kevin's going to take 3, which is half as much as he'd otherwise have taken. Now, Ifro was telegraphing that he had something to do with his mana by doing that. Interestingly, if Kevin had taken out Thalia, Ifro could have vindicated his only blue source. And Ramunap Excavator arrives. Wow. All right. Fetch land here is very solid for Kevin. That's going to give him a lot more flexibility. So he can 1, 2, 3, 4. So he can start by pondering. That'll take up 2 mana, and then he can still summon Tasigur.
Right. He can actually do that and still have the mana open for Mental Misstep if he likes, depending on how he chooses to dredge or to delve rather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that because some of these junk lists run swords, and if Ifro doesn't have swords, if he can't get rid of Tasigur, he's just not in very good shape.
It's kind of fascinating spot here where Kevin's actually incentivized to delve his entire graveyard, forcing Eric to remove his Verdant Catacombs, which he'd like to return with Ramunap Excavator in order to make mana with Deathrite Shaman. So kind of a fascinating little quirky interaction there.
That's true.
He may choose to just abrade this Ramunap Excavator this turn. figuring, that okay, he's going to go for it.
He doesn't have any basics to protect, so if Ifro draws a strip mine, that's not good for him. But currently, Ramunap isn't doing very much.
Yeah, it's not going to work out that well because Eric's going to be able to return the Verdant, sacrifice, find a land, and then still cast Vindicate on this Tasigur. So
Right.
It's going to be a nice turn here for Eric.
Sometimes your opponent in Vintage has Vindicate, but not very often. My friend Andy Lamb built me a deck based around Vindicate that I used to become the Rhode Island state champion back when we had state championships. So,
boom! Here's 5 the grimy, dirty way with a couple creatures.
Creatures are grimy and usually dirty. So, this is just not looking all that exciting for Kevin.
Yeah. Kevin's deck, which is filled with flexible answers like a Braid and cards like Mental Misstep, which are sort of flexible. Flexible often means inefficient, and in that sense, inefficient cards are really weak against hate bear style strategies, especially when they get a chance to hit the ground running. And in this case, with Eric being on the play, so. Kevin really hoping that he's going to get a chance to trade this Vendilion Click off for Ramunap Excavator, but not going to be happy about the follow-up. Great one.
I wonder why Kevin chose to abrade on his turn and then pass. I think if you were going to kill the Ramunap, that makes sense, so you couldn't Ramunap back a land, but as far as killing Thalia goes...
Advanced maneuver here as Eric is wastelanding the Scalding Tarn with Ramunap Excavator in play, assuming that Kevin has no more basics to fetch, which he's right about. Now Eric, we're going to see return the Wasteland and wasteland the new Underground Sea.
Right. So far, Kevin hasn't gained any benefit by playing his abrade on his turn. And I actually like clicking myself here. Yeah, that's what Kevin's doing, I think, because he's not getting much value out of this Mental Misstep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and now it's a Black Lotus. That's a good trade, but it's not going to do all that much here. Now,
it's funny because if Eric didn't have this Gaddock Teague, I was just thinking that Treasure Cruise would be a card that Black Lotus would have rewarded quite a bit, but obviously,
and that's game. So if there were an 18 drop in Magic, I guess you pass the turn hoping that your opponent flips over Draco or Emrakul, but there's no 18 Rakul, so it's just over. All right, Kevin's bluffing, having relevancy. Which is good. I respect that. 18 drop. Oh. And that's that.
Good technical play by Eric using the Ramunap Excavator ability prior to putting it into combat just in case.
Yeah, think of the value. +1. So, yeah, if Kevin Cron's just going to concede, he should have attacked for 3 just to play into the Emrakul possibility. Because think of how Kevin would have felt if Ifro actually did flip over Emrakul.
What a heartbreaker. So neither of these players really has a transformational sideboard. They're mostly doing some trimming around the edges as they kind of refine their strategy. Eric taking out creature removal for more disruption, and Kevin making sure he can handle small creatures. But really, they're just kind of making sure all their ducks are in a row here, and we'll be really happy to be on the play for Game 3.
Yeah. No, these have been pretty exciting games. I think that these are both pretty cool lists. And I think in the third trimester, because we're not repeating decks, we're going to see more sort of out there decks because people will, they'll have already put on their responsible person shoes and played regular decks, and now we're just playing non-blue hate bears and Doretti surprise and various other concoctions and contraptions.
And the best part is I don't know what the regular decks are, so I have no frame of reference for what's supposed to be played. So, interesting. What do you think about Kevin having a mental misstep in his deck? I didn't see really what the other options are, but it looks good here. I haven't found it to be that good against these kind of junk strategies.
It's not usually all that good. It's good against Deathrite Shaman, so it's going to be great against this particular hand, but yeah. I think the reason he has it in is that there's nothing good to bring in. It's not like he's sitting there with better options. He doesn't have it.
Wow. Fascinating play here from Eric. I would never have thought to cast Thoughtseize.
Wow. All right. Yeah. So it looks like, well, he's going to get Kevin's mental misstep, and then this still looks great for Kevin because he gets to go into Night's Whisper.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. What a professional. He's just ready for the Deathrite Shaman anyways.
Can you give me some insight as to why Eric may have chosen to play the Thoughtseize there on turn one? I mean, kind of, basic, Magic theory, at least for when you're playing Standard or one of the newer formats, would be to get your mana-producing creature on the board before your discard spells, and then use that to set up something later. But perhaps in Vintage you don't have the time?
I like playing the Deathrite Shaman there too. It's not like Kevin's going to have a combo to go off with. He's playing a Doretti theme deck. So I also would have led with Deathrite Shaman. This turn, I certainly would have led with a 2-drop because, you play a 2-drop this turn. Next turn, you play a 1-drop and a 2-drop.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have sequenced this differently, but I'm not a Hall of Fame player, so,
Yeah, it's actually going to work out for him here as if you knew that Kevin had a 4th mana and a Jace, then certainly that Wasteland play works out pretty well.
It does. I mean, this turn, if you're Kevin, I think you let Spirit of the Labyrinth arrive, and then you play Jace, and you throw him back to his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes down to that thing I was talking about earlier about the mana of this deck sort of gates you at 1 threat per turn. And you certainly don't mind this happening.
Yeah, just allowing you time to draw that black mana for the Golden Fang.
Right. So you either draw black mana or you draw... I mean, any land is fine. Black mana is also fine. A blue card means that you can force death. You can force the next threat. Oh man! So now, I just think you slam down Jace here. Yeah.
And you're hoping to find a blue card here, right? That's the...
You can't actually cast it, but it doesn't really matter. Next turn, you're going to be able to play Tasigur and defend him, so you just put him on top to play around a discard spell, and you're fine. You're in good shape.
Is there anything that Eric can do from this spot?
He's not in the best of shape. I don't think there's anything in his deck that will really get him out of this. I mean, he can stop the brainstorming by summoning Spirit of the Labyrinth, but all that's doing is letting Kevin Cron bounce that card and then deciding later if he even wants to bother forcing it or letting him have it.
Mm-hmm.
So this deck doesn't play Phyrexian Revoker. It's just pretty soft to a Resolved Walker. One of the problems with playing this junk hate bear strategy in Vintage is that you don't have a lot of power in your deck, and your opponent is probably playing powerful cards because you're playing Vintage. So when your opponent plays a Vintage quality card and you play your Modern Hate Bears card, you're just not able to really answer, right?
Right. I guess Eric's best hope would be for Kevin to tap down in such a way, or use Force of Will and then have Vindicate for Jace the Mind Sculptor. That's how a lot of the ways that he gets out of this mess start, I imagine.
Right. Though with what Kevin has now, it's, you can have a blocker. You can just decide that he's had enough of Spirit of the Labyrinth, then he'll not let him back. Man, so I pretty much love everything about what's happening here with Tasigur. So Kevin is clearing out his graveyard.
Yeah, he's a little constrained on mana because of that Thorn of the Amethyst. He can't both activate Tasigur's ability and cast a Force of Will this turn. So, if Eric is able to present something that requires an answer, Kevin will have a decision to make.
Right. Well, there's good old Manglehorn, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing. Do you counter this, or do you just let this happen and then use Tasigur's ability and have a...
Yeah, I would just let this in.
Tasigur's ability is already pretty exciting in general, but when the only card in your graveyard is Time Walk, it becomes really exciting.
Yep. I would let it in with Tasigur's activated ability, and then I would have another Jace minus, and then if necessary, the next turn you could still Force of Will the same card.
So Jace and Tasigur have pretty good synergy together.
Yep.
So what's your plan here if you're Ifro? Your opponent has a 4/5, which is bigger than your entire deck combined, and also Jace.
Yeah, it's I hate to say this because I don't want to say never, but he just doesn't have the tools here. I mean, you would need Kevin to make some kind of an incredible blunder in order to win this game. Your cards are just not functional against what Kevin's doing. I mean, it's possible that Kevin could not cast anything for the rest of the game and still win, and he certainly is planning on casting things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Kevin has a removal spell to enjoy at his leisure.
He could have braid his own Mox Ruby, Fate Seal himself, let Eric choose, and then skip his next turn, and I think he'd be a very big favorite.
I agree completely. So do you like playing double preordain here more than just using good old TAS? Because I think the Tasigur is +1 card, which I think is especially relevant when you have a library.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, interestingly enough, a couple of the times that he would have activated Tasigur would have put Mental Misstep into the graveyard, and we see kind of the weakness of that card at this point in the game. It would have been very easy for Eric to choose to give Kevin a Mental Misstep, and part of the reason why I think I would prefer to not have it in my deck, although obviously earlier in this game it was quite good for Kevin. So one of those kind of high variance cards in the matchup.
Oh man. Speaking of high variance, here comes a fetchable creature.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I didn't know that Eric had access to the Arbor. There were a few turns or a few games that we've seen where he'd had access to turn 1 Green Sun Zenith, where he chose not to go get the Arbor. So that surprised me.
I like it. It's cool. It's an uncounterable threat, and well. So at this point, I think Kevin has to shift gears, become more defensive, and just sit back and sort of destroy creatures as they attack, and then ride his multiple card advantage engines to victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple options. He could choose to say go, block one of the creatures attacking Jason to braid the other. Could also just Abrade the Thorn of Amethyst, and then set up a Snapcaster Time Walk turn, obviously with access to Demonic Tutor. There's really not, so he's just going to go for the Time Walk now. Hard to really be too upset about that.
It's fun to take free turns.
Yeah, and actually now we see Eric's life total is under pressure as well, as he's going to go down to 9 from the attack here from Tasigur.
Yeah, I mean, this one's just about over. And I guess it's been over, but, you know, I wouldn't want to deny Kevin the enjoyment of playing this out.
Yeah, it's fascinating here, too, that Kevin really has no fear in the world, even with the Horizon Canopy, because of Eric's Thorn of Amethyst. Something like a Swords to Plowshares is just not feasible.
Right, and he has Demonic Tutor, so he can have literally any card he wants. Demonic Tutor is also a shuffle effect for Jace, and there's a sweeper in case it's needed. It kills things that aren't Tasigur, and also does not kill Tasigur. It's also one of the few sweepers that you can cast when Gaddock Teeg has arrived.
Yeah, and I really like it in the situation here. You know, he can now attack with both of his creatures. If Eric takes it, then he's going to be dead for sure next turn. If Manglehorn blocks Snapcaster, then he has the choice of kind of how to deal with the Dryad Arbor. Yep. Kevin's going to go for a different path here. He must have something great with the Demonic Tutor.
I'm interested to see what he gets.
Normally, okay. Yeah.
I guess we'll never find out. All right. Well, we were denied finding out what happens, but hey, we saw a fun match of old-timey blue, black, red control against Hate Bears, and that was a fun match.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think that we saw the one game that Eric was on the play and his deck functioned perfectly. It looked like a world beater, which sometimes Hate Bears does, and you're like, wow, why doesn't everyone play these decks? But then sometimes you're on the draw, and as you mentioned quite accurately, you're playing modern and legacy cards against the vintage cards and planeswalkers, and there's really nothing you can do at all to meaningfully interact with the game. So that was the story.
When Hate Bears isn't working, it looks very unimpressive and it looks like a modern deck. But when it is working, it looks like a Mishra's Workshop deck.
Right.
So, I think Hate Bears is a cool archetype, and if you build it right and call the field right, then you're going to do really, really well. And interestingly, Hate Bears actually has a very good Oath matchup. It has all these cards that make Oath completely irrelevant, and Abrupt Decay, which just sort of wins the matchup. So, in picking Oath, I didn't expect Hate Bears. Oath is not actually a good choice in a Hate Bears metagame.
Well, we're halfway through tonight's episode of Vintage Super League. We're going to take a very short break, and then Rich and I are going to jump into the battlefield for match number 4. Don't go anywhere.